What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Week 4 Football Goons preview edition of the podcast. We're talking fantasy football heading into Week 4. 3 weeks in the books, obviously, at this point, and whether your team needs just a slight tune-up or it needs a complete overhaul or replacement at this point, we are here to get you back on track this week. We're going to look at a bunch of different areas where you could improve your team. And we'll talk about some of the biggest stories in fantasy football right now, some of the trends that are happening as well. Right out of the gate, though, we've got to address something really important that I just literally thought about a minute before going live, so this should go real well. Apparently, right now, there is a real-life auction of some of the props and things from the show The Office. Now, everybody in this group is a major fan of The Office, and we're assuming that, most people out there are as well. It's a very popular show. So I'm going to ask this question. If money is not in the equation, it's not a concern, what is the one item you would want to win in that entire auction?
So I told the guys I was going to jump in first because I have mine, and if somebody steals it, I'm going to be sad. I think it's the only legitimate answer for a true fan of the show. And I have a backup for more comedic value, I guess, but I gotta have that letter, man.
Dang it, man! I knew I should have let you go first.
I gotta have the letter that Jim wrote to Pam. I gotta know what. I mean, is there a bigger cliffhanger other than, from what I understand, the entire show Lost that didn't get answered by a finale? I didn't watch Lost, but everybody seemed real angry about it. So I don't know. I gotta see what was in that letter.
Let me ask you a question. If you won the auction, would you keep it to yourself as the only person on the planet who knows it?
Oh, of course.
Oh man, I don't know if I can do it. If it's like so life-changing, like my answer was the teapot with the letter.
That's what mine was too.
The teapot with the letter.
Hey, you better get that teapot.
I want the letter, but okay. So if I have to pick another one, this is kind of a weird one for me, but I would actually like the water cooler. I just think
that's a cool thing. Yeah.
That's a cool thing to have if I can't have what I really want, which is the letter. So
now, do you disagree with the statement I said that I think Michael's mug, his coffee mug, would go for the highest price?
Yes and no. Like,
it's the most iconic. I mean,
it's the most iconic piece. I think I'd rather have the Dundee off Michael's desk because, like, World's Best Boss is like everybody has that cup, and people can see that cup and not even associate with the Office if you're not an Office fan. If you have a Dundee, like if you have Michael's Dundee, then like people are gonna be like, "What the heck is a Dundee?" Yeah, right. or they're gonna know right away what it is.
I'd rather have Phyllis's busiest beaver.
It doesn't say busiest; it says bushiest.
Oh, but that's right. All right, we have derailed
as always.
All right, so deal. Anything secondary if you can't have?
I mean, that was number one. My number two answer, just because it's fun, I want the basketball hoop out of the warehouse because that's a good item to have. It's usable, plus it's cool to have their basketball hoop.
Oh, wait, are we assuming that size, like the size of the object doesn't matter, or do we have to actually have room for it? Because I'll just take the baler out of the...
That's true. I'll take a baler.
I'll take the baler. I'll take a picture of it. I'll @ Steve Carell on the Twitter machine and be like, yo, you could finally come to my house and use the baler if you want.
I thought about the reception desk. I thought about how cool that would be. I thought about Dwight's nunchucks.
Of course you did.
But to me, I know the teapot is kind of like a high quality one, but don't you want Pam's painting of the office, like the building?
Oh, that's a really good one.
That is a good one.
I feel like it kind of, that was like a central focus of so much. Like it's in every shot almost. Right. So I don't know. I feel like I want the painning. So as much as Pam annoyed me.
I want an entire box of Shroot Bucks.
Just make them.
You probably print them and not spend the money on anything but printer ink. All right, let's talk about who's trending. We look at some of the names here who have been claimed or are being the most claimed, attempted to be claimed on waivers over the past couple days here, coming off of week 3. And we're going to evaluate if and where they could help your team. So First name here, coming off of Thursday night, we start at the quarterback position. Baker Mayfield. Listen, it's Baker time in Cleveland. He looked impressive on Thursday night, but will it equal fantasy success for you?
It should. I mean, it seems like it will, right? I mean, we have little to go on, but like Rock, you were talking earlier today about Sam Darnold, and then they put it on tape, and he's been kind of mediocre the last 2 games. But from a fantasy standpoint, he didn't play week 1 the way Baker did and totally reignite an offense. I mean, they were dead in the water against a good defense, and then it looked like the Chiefs playing a trash defense. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't always trust rookie QBs, but when I do, I like number 1 overall picks with weapons everywhere and play with zero fear.
I'll give you the zero fear factor, but like to an extent, they didn't play. Like I'm going to argue that Sam played just as well in week 1 as Baker did in week 2, and as a matter of fact, probably played better. Like Sam went for over 200. No, I'm sorry, he went for 198. Baker went for 201, but Sam threw in a half. But Sam threw 2 touchdowns and Baker threw none. So like
two touchdown drives though. I mean, listen. I'm not here to argue.
But
I shouldn't have brought it up.
I guess that's no. It's no. Like this was going to be my argument point to begin with anyway, and I'm glad you did bring it up. As much as I like Baker, and as much as I think Baker is going to be a fantastic quarterback, he's a great leader. He has a lot of the intangibles, and he's accurate as anything. All those things should add up to success, but the simple fact is I think the offense is built to be safe for Baker, and that could mean a lot of running inside the 20s, inside in the red zone. He's going to be able to work the ball down the field, but exactly what we saw against the Jets is they're going to put the ball in the end zone with the running backs. Well, with Duke Johnson, with Carlos Hyde, eventually with Nick Chubb. I understand the weapons are there on the outside, but like it does kind of confuse me a little bit that he was so accurate and so easily able to move the ball down the field, and yet they didn't he's not the one putting the ball in the end zone. You know what I mean? So that does scare me for a fantasy outlook.
I'm not looking too much into that. I'm a wait and see right now on Mayfield. I know it's kind of a cop out in relationship to what we're talking about. I'm just not sure. Honestly, I feel like just the energy in that building and the energy of the team just picked up so much that they kind of rode the wave of that. So now that, a lot of the, that adrenaline, so to speak, has kind of worn off from that situation, I want to see how it continues to play out. I'm not saying that it's not worth, picking up Baker Mayfield if he's out there and you're hurting at quarterback. I'm probably not using waiver priority for it. But still, at the same time, I want to see what he can do moving forward. All right, let's talk quickly here about Ryan Tannehill. He's playing red hot right now. And, he's been about as efficient as anybody else out there through the first couple weeks. And now he's got the porous Patriots defense this week in week 4. Is this a situation where, it looks too good to be true and he's going to kind of get slammed back down to earth? Or do we expect him to continue that level of play this week?
I'm a big no thanks on Tannehill. I know he's played well and his numbers are nice. Looked real nice this last week on paper with 3 passing touchdowns. 2 of those are just jet sweeps that he tossed forward instead of handed off. I mean, if the receiver was 8 inches closer and took a handoff, he has 1 passing touchdown. So right. I know that's part of the offense, so you can't crush him for it. But ultimately, you're going to see a theme tonight. I just don't trust the Dolphins. I need to see more. I need to see a lot more. You beat the Jets. You beat you beat the Jets. You haven't looked real good. You beat the Titans on 2 really long delays. I'm just not a Dolphins guy yet.
Yeah, it's definitely suspect to this point. And this feels like one of those things where New England is kind of set themselves up here to make a statement this week. Everybody's looking at New England losing 2 games in a row. However, with all that said, I do still think he's going to be productive this week. That passing defense is just not very good. So from a fantasy perspective, I think that he could be productive for you. I'm probably still not, necessarily throwing him into my starting lineup if I have better options. But if for some reason, maybe I was invested in Jimmy Garoppolo and I'm looking for a guy now and I have to plug and play, I think that Tannehill's a perfect candidate for that this week. All right, let's talk about one of our favorites here on the podcast. Always comes up, our boy Buck Allen. Here we are talking about him again, but legitimately, he's become a touchdown vulture in this Ravens offense that we really didn't expect a whole lot from, but they're scoring at a decent rate at this point. So is Buck Allen a person who, number one, are you considering picking him up to help your team? But do you think that he'll be able to sustain some of the production that he's given to this point?
I don't see it. I mean, listen, this backfield kind of is so confusing to me because, like, for the last 2 or 3 years, this has been the thing constantly. They're just riding the hot hand. And Collins had the fumble issue in week 1, but he has 2 touchdowns already. Buck Allen's getting in the end zone, neither of which are really putting up a ton of yards. So it's like almost like you're banking on whichever guy you pick from this Baltimore offense to be the one that's going to score the touchdown that week. That seems like a not safe game to play. You know what I mean? So if you have to play that game, I don't want to play with either of these 2 guys.
I actually think that's the safe game to play. If you're in a touchdown only league, knock yourself out with Buck Allen. Have fun. Clearly the goal line roll. He only has 102 yards from scrimmage so far this year in 3 games.
Yeah.
34 yards a game. I mean, Alex Collins is definitely the regular running back. Buck Allen is just that classic vulture back, and that doesn't exist for fantasy value. It exists to irritate the guy who owns Alex Collins.
Yeah.
You don't pick up Mike Allstott back in the day. He might end with 8 touchdowns, but he's going to have 300 yards rushing. That's not viable. It's just irritating. That's all it is. You can't pick up Buck Allen.
Yeah, I'm going to say avoid here on Buck Allen just because, yes, he's got 4 touchdowns through the first 3 games, but I just don't think it's sustainable. I mean, at this point now, when you see him come into the game at the goal line, you're going to have to start to plan, okay, it's going to Buck Allen. So I think defense are going to adapt to it. They're going to change what they're doing against the Ravens, and you're going to start to see that they're not going to be as successful. And I do think that obviously Collins is the better back from 20 to 20, and I think that he'll have more opportunities to cash in as the season goes along here.
And I think what's sad is he has 4 touchdowns, which early in the season like this should have you locked in the top 10. He's still only RB13.
Yeah.
Like, he has to sustain 1 1/3 touchdowns per game to even be an RB2.
Well, that's the thing is he's not really getting the touches that you think he's getting.
Right.
Like, he has a total right now, 13 receptions, 16 carries. He's got 30 touches in 3 games. Like, that's nothing. You know what I mean? So the simple fact that he has 4 touchdowns, yes, impressive, but he's got 32 rushing yards on the season. He's almost got more touchdowns than rushing yards. Like, that's not a place I want to be. Like, I don't want a guy whose stat line at the end of the day could be like 2 for 2 with 1 touchdown. Like, that doesn't entice me.
Yeah, and the more telling fact here before we move on from him is his yards per attempt. I mean, week 2, 1.3 yards per carry. Last week, 1.1 yards per carry. A little bit better in the receiving department, but even one of his weeks was 3 yards per catch. So, yeah. I mean, like, that's probably the more telling factor in all of this is that he's been lucky enough to convert it to touchdowns. But again, I think defenses are going to start to begin to shut him down.
Well, South, keep in mind, too, he's averaging 2 yards per carry because all of his carries are inside the 5.
That's true. All right, let's talk about Chris Ivory, another guy who seems to be a perennial yes, exactly. A perennial discussion point on the show here. He had 126 total yards last week with LaShawn McCoy out. McCoy could be down again this week. He is, generally the kind of guy who plays through things, but apparently is still in a lot of pain. So Chris Ivory, is he a product of an unexpected offensive explosion, or do you think that he could put up another big week here?
That kind of sums a lot up, though, doesn't it? Everybody's like just jumping in to talk about this guy. I would look elsewhere unless you can guarantee me that this is what Josh Allen and the Bills offense is. And I don't think anybody in the football world is ready to guarantee me that this is what Josh Allen and the Bills offense is. Is it possible? Of course. I mean, we knocked the guy a lot. There's a reason he went top 10 in the NFL draft. I mean, he's got athletic ability. He can make an offense explosive. I'm not ready to chalk it up to any more than an incredible game plan against a shell-shocked Vikings team you know was looking past them. So
Well,
I don't know. I'm not in on Ivory.
maybe this is me wishful thinking on the whole Darnold scenario, but like I'm thinking that like, you know, we saw Baker for the first time this week. We saw Josh Allen. Like, let's see what teams do once they start scheming for these quarterbacks and expecting from these quarterbacks. Because obviously the Jets definitely weren't preparing for Baker. Who knows what the Vikings were preparing for, because it looked like nothing. But you know, now that we have tape on these guys, I don't know what that offense is going to look like going forward. So that's what scares me a little bit. And if Allen regresses enough and he looks like kind of like preseason Josh Allen, then they can just stack the box, and then Chris Ivory is useless, because as big as he is, he's not breaking away from, you know, runners. He's not that fast. He just can't do it. So benefited a lot from Allen being able to spread out the Vikings very quickly, and then obviously just gashing them in garbage time once they were up 27-0. So I'm not putting a waiver claim in on a Chris Ivory this week.
I'm not even going to give him gashing. I mean, look, this is a guy who had 23 touches. It took him to get all those yardage, 3 catches for 70 yards, which I don't anticipate is going to be a regular thing for Chris Ivory by any means. So we had 20 carries for 56 yards, averaged 2.8 per carry, all of that done with no touchdowns. So if you think the Bills are potentially going to maintain some offensive production, and which I don't, and he didn't score last week, what makes you think he's going to score this week, you know, in a game where they're going to, you know, hope to maintain what they built on? I just don't see it. I don't think he's a candidate to really score. So, and again, the yards per carry, you know, I was the kind of guy that always bashed on Jeremy Hill for a number better than that. 2.8. I mean, you can fall down on your knees and then fall down and get 2.8.
It's always kind of been what Chris Ivory's been too. Like he's 30 years old. He's put in some good games here and there. Like even a couple years ago when he played for the Jets, he had 166 yards and a touchdown one game, 146 and a touchdown the next game. And then the next 3 went 41, 17, and 26. So I think it's going to be a lot more of that you never know what you're going to get. The Bills' offense still isn't good, so you're just not going to know what you're going to get week to week, which is scary.
Right. All right, let's talk about Tyler Boyd with the Cincinnati Bengals. Look, he's not quite the breakout that I think a lot of people expected, because I think people kind of pegged John Ross in that role this year. But Tyler Boyd has shown pretty well for himself. He had at least 6 catches in his last 2 games, scored in each of his last 2 games. So is Tyler Boyd a player that you're interested in right now?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's funny. I feel like we talk a lot about, I liked him in college. You know, Deal and I, as high school football nerds, Tyler Boyd, Clareton Bears. I mean, we've been watching him since he was like 15. And this potential was definitely always there. Yeah. So I like seeing him kind of wake it up here at an NFL level at receiver. He's a number 2 receiver in what looks like a really high-powered offense. You like that. It's time to ignore. Sometimes in fantasy, you've got to ignore names, and you've got to pay attention to the fact that he's the number 2 receiver on a high-powered offense. He's absolutely, at worst, flex-worthy once buys really kick in here.
And not only is he number 2, he's always single covered, because he's very much number 2.
Yeah, he's not number 2 because the number 1's okay.
Right.
I think it's AJ Green.
Right. And let's just put this into perspective, because I know Miles says this all the time, and we've all said it from time to time. When does a young wide receiver in the league really start to hit his stride?
Year 3.
Year 3. This is Tyler Boyd's year 3. John Ross is still only in year 2, so he's got a little bit of learning to do. Next year will be John Ross's breakout year. I'm on board.
John Ross kind of sucks, though.
Well, he's only in year 2. That's why. No, but it's so correct, because like he's had 2 years to sit and learn behind AJ Green, and now it shows to be paying off. Listen, there are lots of teams in this league where you're going to have to play their number 2 receiver on a weekly basis. Tyler Boyd should be one of them at this point, even if it's in a flex, or if you're in a league like ours where you start 3 wide receivers. You're going to play other teams' you're going to play teams' number 2 wide receivers. It's going to happen.
Yeah, he's right now converting just about 7 out of every 10 targets, which is really good for a guy who is making those bigger chunk plays.
Yep.
So they're successful right now on some of those deeper routes down the field. He had 22 yards per reception last week, 15 the week before that. So they're hitting on all cylinders right now when they target him down the field, and they're converting. So there's not a lot of missed opportunities there. So I actually like that element. And when you look at, they're going to play Atlanta this week, whose secondary is just decimated by guys who've gone on IR at this point. I think they're going to be susceptible to the big play. Tyler Boyd is a nice play this week.
Yeah, and I'll mention also about that 70%. That's also huge for a guy like him because he's going to get 7 to 9 targets. He's not going to get the 15 targets that sometimes AJ Green's going to get. So when he's producing out at 70%, he's not going to get the target share, but 70% is still a good number.
And he just so you guys know, he's averaging right now 7 targets per game.
Yeah.
And he's averaging 5 catches per game.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, let's talk about the player that I think a lot of people are wondering about right now. That is Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. Look, he's coming off of an absolutely monster game last week. 7 catches on 8 targets, 146 yards, and 3 touchdowns. The week before that, 4 catches on 5 targets for 64 yards and a touchdown. So 4 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks is not too bad. I think the question that most people are wondering at this point, is he kind of going to become a go-to guy now in that offense? For a long time, Julio Jones did a lot of the work up and down the field, and then other guys were cashing in. So is this a candidate to be that guy who cashes in?
Deal said that Matt Ryan was going to throw over 50 touchdown passes this year. And as you'll find out in a couple of days when our Goons Ghost and Daily article comes out on footballgoons.com, Julio Jones doesn't catch any of them. So they got to go to somebody. That's a little prop to Miles. They got to go to somebody, and Ridley looks great right now. Like I would jump all over that. If he's available in your league, you need to snatch him up.
Yeah, I kind of think it's the same thing I said about Tyler Boyd. He's the number 2 receiver in a very high-powered offense, but it's a more high-powered offense, and he's a better number 2 receiver.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you like Boyd, you've got to like Ridley even more.
Yeah, I would kind of temper your expectations, obviously. I'm not sure
Don't
that
expect 3 touchdowns every week.
Yeah, and even to a lesser extent, like I don't think that he's like a double-digit targets kind of guy. I just don't. There's too many mouths to feed in that offense. And again, Julio is still your guy. So, but considering the fact that, again, well, he's not in the red zone or in the end zone, but, between the 20s, he's eaten up a ton of targets. So this is a guy who's converting, right now, 85% of his targets. Again, small sample size, but it's a lot of high percentage stuff that they're just allowing him to make a play, after he gets the ball in his hands. So that's really appealing. All right, guys, let's take a quick pause here and talk about our friends at Gorb. One of the things that I love about this time of the year is that it's perfectly acceptable to just throw a hoodie on and walk out of the house. And I know, the guys in this conversation, the guys on this podcast enjoy a nice, comfortable hoodie. And I'm assuming that a lot of you out there listening do as well. Well, Gorb has some fantastic, comfortable, stylish, and well-designed hoodies out there. You can check them out at GHORBH.com and just find something. You're guaranteed to find something that you like, whether it's the style, the color, the fit. We love the hockey style with the lace up, gives you a little bit of breathability on the neck. They're soft. They're warm. They're comfortable. Gorb.com. And you can get a constant reminder when you wear it as well that in life, you've only got 2 choices. You can either get hungry or be hungry. Check them out at gorb.com today. All right, guys, I've entitled this section Fish or Cut Bait. And I don't know why. I was in a really weird mood at lunchtime this afternoon as I was kind of writing this. So,
Have tuna for lunch?
no, I actually didn't. Although they did serve fish in the cafeteria, and I'm really not a fan of cafeteria fish. So
mass-produced fish is a dangerous proposition.
Yeah, I actually wanted to call this "Poop or Get Off the Pot," but I didn't know how well that would go over.
I would have loved it.
All right, so the premise here is that 3 weeks in, it's still a very small sample size. But let's look at a few guys who you may either be considering moving on from or investing in while their stock is a little bit more affordable. I think the first and most obvious name on the list here is David Johnson, running back of the Arizona Cardinals. Look, this is the same great player, but now he's on an offense that is just kind of stuck in the mud right now. They're stuck in neutral. They're going nowhere fast. Maybe a switch to Josh Rosen makes a difference for him here. So is this a player who, you're trying to kind of cut bait with here, or are you going to fish?
I'm fishing.
Two of us in this conversation made a David Johnson centered trade today.
Yes,
and I was going to say,
so you can tell which of us is fishing and which of us is cutting bait.
I was going to say, if your answer is anything other than cutting bait, I call false. No, I'm buying because honestly, listen, I love David Johnson. We all do. I think having Sammy Sleeves there for the first 3 weeks scared the living Jesus out of all of us. It didn't look good. I think that the simple fact that in the fourth quarter with the game on the line, they were like, let's put the rookie in. Let's see if we can get this win. Like that to me shows that all right, the Sammy Sleeves project is over. We're going all in on Rosen. If nothing else, Rosen has the ability to go deeper, which will then not put 10 guys in the box for David Johnson and maybe 11 in the box for David Johnson and open up not only the running game for him, but then the passing game, because teams are going to have to play it a little bit more honest with a quarterback who's not afraid to go down the field. So honestly, I was shocked that Miles did sell on David Johnson today because I'm ready to buy in.
Well, let me tell you why. You're speaking from a point of pure logic, which is nice. Good for you. Let me tell you who doesn't have a lot of logic, and that's head coach Steve Wilks and offensive coordinator Mike McCoy. Because while you just said Josh Rosen came in and tried to save the game, and that shows they're ready to hand the tools over, ignoring the fact that that's a ridiculous idea, putting a rookie in there for his first NFL action with the game, really the season on the line, because now you're 0-3. Forget all that. 3rd and 2 with the season on the line, Chase Edmonds gets the carry because they pulled David Johnson out of the game to reprimand him for missing a blocking assignment. This might be the worst head coach offensive coordinator duo in the league. And now Steve Wilks is learning. Mike McCoy has a track record of being a piece of trash when it comes to featuring his good players. I trust
Melvin Gordon.
Right. I trust David Johnson, obviously. I like Josh Rosen in there a lot. I do not trust them to use David Johnson to the best of his ability at all. And the line is atrocious. So even when he does get his opportunities, it's limited. He's out there by himself. It's ridiculous. So I don't want to trust a staff that's willing to mid-game, season on the line, pull their very best player to say, hey, you should have blocked better. Watch this undrafted rookie get your carry. Oh, stopped. Up, 4th down, 0-3, season over.
Yeah. I think the shocking thing to me is that he's not had 15 carries yet this season. I'm not sure why.
He should have 40 a game.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Well, and then if you're chasing like crazy, then fine. They led most of the game.
Yeah, they've been competitive
against the Bears. How he didn't get 25-plus touches is ridiculous.
Other than the Rams, they were in every game for the most part. Now, they got beat up by Washington, but they were still fairly in that game late in the game.
In the first half, he still wasn't getting touches.
No. Yeah, but, I mean, he's got 5 targets per game as well at this point. Like, this is insane. So, I mean, we're talking about maybe half or a third of the targets that he should be getting in this offense. So for me, until I see that, I'm really more willing to sell at this point.
My only thought is if you have him, unless you're getting a ransom for him or unless you're getting pieces you absolutely need, hold on to him. If we're in the first topic, if we're talking about Buck Allen and Chris Ivory being viable options, hold on to David Johnson, man. We're talking about names of guys signed, could be on practice squads. So please, unless you're desperate, hold on to David Johnson. He's worth it.
Yeah, to go a little into this, I own David Johnson in 2 leagues. The other one, I don't see a good partner, and the offers I've made have been rejected. Well, I was able to get DeAndre Hopkins and Joe Mixon from Rocco, not straight up for David Johnson. It was a ridiculous, gigantic
We
trade.
did a ridiculous trade for the sake of
you swap teams. You just swap teams.
It's against everything I believed in, but ultimately I felt like Deal just said, I did get somewhat of a ransom for David Johnson. So,
and it helped your team.
Right, it helped my team ultimately because I also have Kamara, so I'm okay at RB1 still.
You got potentially the best receiver in the league.
Right.
All right, so this one's a little less to a little bit less of an extent than David Johnson. Deshaun Jackson, it's hard to believe at this point that he's really going to sustain the production that he's had to this point, but he's surprisingly owned at a very high clip across a lot of leagues. Is this the right time to try and sell high on Deshaun Jackson?
Yep.
Actually,
last week was.
That's exactly what I have. Actually, it was last week.
Yeah, you missed it.
I mean, it's still there. I think, but you're getting less than you would have last week. My biggest issue, other than just, D-Jack's numbers being number 1 in the league in receiving yards is not going to sustain. My biggest issue beyond that is we have no guarantees that Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be this team's quarterback. He will be this week, but if they struggle this week, they lose, and he throws 3 picks again, they could turn back to Jameis Winston, and Jameis prefers Mike Evans and his tight ends. He has ever since Deshaun got there. Ryan Fitzpatrick's whole career has been a skinny target tree to wide receivers. That's his MO. It's what he does. So if he continues starting, I hang on to D-Jax. I think he's nice value for you. But if you're looking to move him, it was last week. Don't wait any longer, for sure.
The only thing I disagree with, and I do agree with you that I think it's sell rather than hold on to him because I don't think it's sustainable. I'm not so sure that that Ryan Fitzpatrick isn't preferring Mike Evans. It's just that D-Jax has that breakaway speed. You know what I mean? So
he prefers receivers is my point. Jameis only receivers, it's Mike Evans. After that, it's Brayton and O.J. Howard. It's kind of his MO. I mean, who doesn't prefer Mike Evans?
I just don't want it to come off. I just don't want it to come off like Fitzpatrick is ignoring Evans because Evans is having a phenomenal first 3 games as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I already said last week that last week was the week to sell, that his numbers were going to drop off and there was going to be a lot of feast or famine. Now this week you got 3 for 37 and you probably started him. So this is what he does. He's going to do it even more at almost 32 years old. So expect to have weeks where you get essentially no points from one of your receivers.
All right, let's talk about Blake Bortles. First 2 weeks of the year, decent fantasy outputs, surprisingly good game coming off of the New England game. Really kind of an ugly game all around last week against Tennessee. Is now the time, if you own Blake Bortles, which, again, I bring up some of these names based on their high percentage of ownership that I was very surprised about, is now the time to try and move Blake Bortles. I mean, you have Jimmy Garoppolo has gone down. You're starting to get into some bye week time here. Feels like it's right.
I think that's really your only option is the Jimmy G owner. Depending what your league looks like, even then. I mean, I don't know. I have Cam, and he's on bye. I'm not trading for Blake Bortles for a week. I'd rather pick up somebody. Baker Mayfield's on pretty much every waiver wire at this point. So if it's for a week, I'm not trading for Blake Bortles.
I just don't see how, unless you're in a 2-quarterback league or something crazy like Miles' 3-quarterback league, I can't.
Why do we always call that crazy?
It's crazy, man.
It's 3 because if you play with 8 teams, and that means there's only 6 bench quarterbacks.
I understand.
That means not every team in the league can have a bench quarterback for bye weeks. That's crazy.
That's bad math. Yes, you can. 4 times 8.
So, and I know that
math.
Well, I'm not the math teacher, so
I know that we're kind of looking at this from a trade perspective, but like also,
I'm sorry. I don't care if you're a math.
You should be able to do 8 times 3, 8 times 4, man.
I'm sorry.
Oh man.
Not a math teacher.
Listen, I know we're kind of going at this from a trade perspective, but like also, is this the time to like dump him and maybe move on to a Mayfield, a Tannehill, another player?
If you're a backup quarterback guy, Blake is just fine.
He's number 15 in the league right now.
Yeah, that's solid on your bench.
Yeah. He's just average. That's what he is. Like I don't even understand why he's being added at such a high clip. Like,
well, because he's always capable of these 30+ point games, and if you catch him in the right matchup, that's a great bye week filler.
He's capable of them, but it's not consistent with them. So you're stuck.
It's pretty consistent against bad defenses.
Yeah, he crushes bad defenses always.
He lit up New England.
Bad defense.
Which is a bad defense right now. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if it's your bye week and you see that he's playing a bad secondary, then it's a good start.
I mean, worth noting, like I'm not saying the Jets are a bad defense because they're not, but their secondary is still coming together. He's got the Jets this week, and then he's got Kansas City after that.
Tasty.
So, I mean, that's a pretty tasty area there, especially during bye week time. So, another thing to consider if you're trying to potentially dangle him and just get a small return.
Alex Smith on bye this week. That's a good start.
It's just crazy to me to think that like we're talking about a guy. Yes, he lit up New England, but the other 2 games he's sub 175.
All right, but
insane.
It's the Blake Bortles because I wouldn't want him on my team, like, but he's always a top 12 quarterback, always in fantasy.
Yep. All right, let's talk about Larry Fitzgerald here. Kind of in the same vein as David Johnson. His stock is obviously down right now. Are you interested in buying low though? Now that Josh Rosen is into the equation.
Yes. I mean, for this, I'm going to give you the same answer I gave David Johnson. I just like the ability of the offense to look more unpredictable. You know what I mean? Not predictable.
I think you meant to say non-productive.
Yeah, it sounded more like that.
What was coming out, you should have stuck with it.
We've already touched on the fact that he's not a math guy or an English guy.
Stop. I hate the Fitzgerald thing because I finally jumped back to the all right, Larry's never going to lose it, and whether it's his fault or not, he's struggled through 3 weeks. Let's just call it that.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I think the change of quarterback really helps.
And very well good. It can't hurt.
It can't hurt. Yeah.
He can't get worse. And you know what? I'm going to say it's not his fault. It's not his fault at all.
Yeah, he's got 113 receiving yards on the season, no touchdowns at this point. I actually think with Rosen coming in, he's going to be looking for some of those more security blanket type throws, those safe throws. That suits Larry Fitzgerald. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm thinking David Johnson, but
it suits Larry Johnson and David Fitzgerald both.
Yes.
You're absolutely right.
I think it suits those 2 players nicely, and I think it also benefits the tight end there as well. But again, you would have thought like that's Sam Bradford's MO too, and it didn't work out. So who even knows at this point? All right, an interesting name here to round out this area of the podcast, Kareem Hunt. Some are looking to sell on Kareem Hunt despite a pretty good week 3. So where are you on this? Are you a buy while the people are looking to do it right now, or are you holding on to him if you own it? Like, what's your perspective on this?
I gotta tell you, I tried in every league last week to get Kareem Hunt, and I got 0 shares. Nobody wanted to give it up, but nobody wants to trade me ever, so it is what it is.
I'll be honest. I not on this week. You'll read that on our on our Goons Ghost and Daily article on Thursday on footballgoons.com that I'm out on Kareem Hunt this week. But in terms of going forward, I'm actually just as in on Kareem Hunt as I was when the season started. I understand that Patrick Mahomes is playing at a ridiculous rate right now. That rate is not necessarily sustainable. 13 touchdowns in 3 games. I mean, I know he's doing it, but does anybody actually expect that? I mean, that would put him at like 75 passing touchdowns this season. I think that's going to come to a point in time. I hope he does too, because that'd be super fun to watch. But realistically speaking, there's going to come to a time where they're going to have to rely on the run and run the ball, and Kareem Hunt is top dog there.
I don't agree. I don't think that they're ever going to worry about running the ball a ton anymore, ever again. They're so good passing the ball. I just like I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
That's not sustainable.
And I'm just joking around, but like I don't think there's going to be a ton of games where they're not going to, with the weapons they have, be able to pass at will if they want to. So I think what you have to expect with Kareem Hunt, we were used to him piling up a ton of yards last year. I don't think that's necessarily going to be what he does this season. He's still going to get his, but he's not going to be a guy who's running for 100+ every week and catching a whole bunch of balls. He's going to be a guy who is going to be touchdown dependent. And I think that you're still going to see he's still going to cross the goal line a decent amount, but he's not going to pile up a ton of yards because this team is built now to air it out.
Yeah, I think he's going to cross the goal line some because I don't know how you stop them.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, at the right price, I would buy every Chief. I'd buy the tar out of every single Chief right now because we say it's not sustainable. If we had this podcast in 2013, how long would we have sat here and said, Peyton's pace is not sustainable? It's not sustainable. And then he threw for 5,500 yards and 55 touchdowns. So, of course, listen, if Mahomes ends with 70 touchdowns, it's probably the greatest season we've ever watched in the NFL. So it's unlikely. But at the same time, you're going to say it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. Why?
Yeah, I mean,
what's
look
going
at
to slow down? I mean, this it's skewed because of the 6. The 6 touchdown game is ridiculous. Watching the Chiefs, why can't he throw 3 to 4 touchdowns every week?
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue because in our initial reactions topic here, my first thing is, aside from the obvious fantasy implications, do you think the touchdown record is legit in play for Pat Mahomes?
I'm going to keep talking because, yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I just hit on this. They've got a coach whose MO is air the ball out, air it out like crazy. They've got arguably the best tight end in football. They've got a running game that's definitely good enough to keep teams honest. And on top of that, the running back can really catch and is a factor in the receiving game. And then you've got 3 speed guys on the outside who aren't one-trick ponies, though. Like, I know I've got the Georgia thing, so I root for him anyhow. Chris Conley's really good, and he's a distant third receiver on the Chiefs. I mean, I don't know how you defend that team.
No, and
how you do it.
To further your point, like he's doing this with minimal attempts at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like last week he had 38 attempts, but the 2 weeks before that he had 27 and 28. So like it's not like he's dropping back 40 times at this point. And I don't see that defense getting a whole lot better.
No, they're going to be they're fun games to watch every week.
They're going to be in a shootout every week. They're going to be throwing the ball. They're not like, even if they're putting up decent points, the other team is doing the same thing. You know, like the 49ers lost Garoppolo last week and still pretty much had a shootout with them, you know, right down to the end. So, you know, this is just what you're going to have with the Chiefs. So there's going to be a ton of opportunity to put up stats.
I think the record is attainable. I don't think his current pace is attainable. I guess that's the way.
That's the question. Is the record,
his current pace would put him at 69 and a quarter touchdowns. So we'll run down to 69 at that point. I don't know that that's attainable, but like 3.5 touchdowns a game gets you 56 on the nose. You know what I mean? So
if he goes 3 a game from this point, that's 52, and he hasn't been held to under 3 yet. I mean, he's 6-4 and 3. That's his worst game so far. So should be fun to track at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's got some favorable matchups, you know, this season as well.
I wish he played the Chiefs.
Yeah. If he played the Chiefs, it'd be even better. But he is going to play the Raiders. He is going to play the Ravens, who have been able to be thrown on right now with some injuries.
Patriots
are on the schedule there. The Bengals could be thrown on.
Yeah, it's got the Steelers. I already had the Steelers.
Yeah, so I mean, the opportunity is going to be there. So it's going to be interesting to watch, and I think it's in play. I really do. All right, so how should owners who invested in Le'Veon Bell deal with owning him at this point? What's his value in a potential trade? I know that NFL teams are trying to figure this out, but as a fantasy owner, what kind of value should you expect to be able to get for Lev Bell?
Nothing.
From experience?
From experience, nothing. No, I mean, listen, I will give you the experience. I don't know if you guys own any shares of Lev, and I own 2 shares of Lev. It's frustrating because you get to the point where you have to make a decision of, do I take way less value than I think this player is worth because the potential is there that he won't play? Or do I be stubborn and hold on in the hopes that he either plays for the Steelers, which isn't going to happen, or gets traded, which is the only possibility really at this point? Because even if he comes in week 11 for the Steelers, why would the Steelers play him at that point? Like, there's no reason to. Like that is so broken. So you're basically either holding on to Lev with the hopes that he gets traded, or selling him at way less than what he's really valued at, and then hoping that he doesn't get traded. Like it's a lose-lose with Lev right now.
Yeah, it's weird because I don't think he plays for the Steelers ever again.
No.
And I know he's a special player, and we can talk about what he brings to the offense, but like what we're not talking about is that they really haven't missed a beat with James Conner. Like the offense is not the problem for that team. So unless Lev can jump over and play cornerback 1 or play safety, I don't see how he makes.
They really need him to play both.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how he makes that drastic of a difference to the team. Again, I understand he's a nightmare to match up against and all that, but their offense is still hitting on all cylinders right now. So I don't know.
Funny. It's so funny to hear you say that, because I asked you that question after week 1, and you were the first one. And I'm not bashing on you. You were the first one to respond. Absolutely, Lev makes a difference over Connor. But now that we've seen it for 3 straight games, it's like, does he make that much of a difference? I don't think he does. And I'm not saying that James Conner is as good as Le'Veon Bell. I'm saying that offense has so many other weapons that what you're getting from Connor is good, more than good enough, that you don't need to pay Lev Bell that kind of money out of the backfield.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too for me was like the matchup element when I felt that way. But you're starting to see like the Steelers are getting some production out of the tight end position too, which like the past couple of years they haven't. So that's adding a little bit more of that shorter to intermediate. And then you've got Juju and AB, and Washington is playing well. So like there's weapons all over the place there.
Losing Lev actually made them more aware of the other weapons that they have. And honestly, I'm not saying it's the right decision or the wrong decision for them, but I think what they realized is, hey, we have talented players that we can get the ball to instead of Lev, and not spend that kind of money on Lev, which is why they didn't value him where he thinks he's valued at. That's what this all boils down to begin with.
So all that to say, I think if you're a Lev Bell owner and you're an 0-3 team or a 1-2 team who's not been doing very well, and you could get something that's going to be productive for you right now to try and turn your season around, I think that's the instance where I would look to potentially move him. Other than that, I mean, if you're in a good position, just sit on him and see what happens. I mean, the return is not going to be great at this point.
I'll jump in. I'm going to wait another week because I do own Lev in a league. I'm struggling in no small part to the fact that I also have Joe Mixon and Doug Baldwin,
sounds like
and Alshon Jeffrey and Carson Wentz. So it's been a rough start. But I will say I'm going to wait one more week, because if he does get traded to New York or Indianapolis or San Francisco or Tampa Bay, I'm going to be really thankful I held on to him.
Oh, yeah. That I think that's the reason why I'm hanging on to him is for the fear that he like, especially like as homerish as this is going to sound, like especially if he gets traded to the Jets and I traded him away the week before that happens, like I'm going to be really salty and pissed at myself for letting that happen.
All right, so Chris Carson, Kerryon Johnson, and Aaron Jones are names that are emerging this week at the running back position. So I'm going to ask you to rank them from the guy you most want to own to the guy you least want to own, and give, a reason for that ranking.
I would actually be shocked if any of us are any different on this. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, go ahead.
I went Kerryon, Jones, and Carson, and it's based on the level at which I trust each of those offensive lines.
I'm different.
Oh, you really? Wow.
I'm different as well.
I go Kerryon, Carson, and then about 40 other players, and then Aaron Jones.
That's crazy.
That's silly to me.
That's so silly.
I actually go Kerryon, Aaron, Chris Carson, but not because of the level of trust. I just think like Aaron Jones, like he could potentially be a top 10 back in fantasy. I just need to see some consistency out of him. Like from everything that we've seen to this point, coming out of school and just initial glimpses in that offense, like he's a pretty good back in a high, percentage offense. So he's super appealing to me. Kerryon Johnson, I already said earlier this year that, I think he's going to be the rookie of the year. I think he's going to be now the Lions' number one back, and he's going to show what he can do at this point. And then for Chris Carson, I actually like Chris Carson a lot. I think that just having Russell Wilson opens up some things. So if they get more creative with how they run the ball and do some more, of those option type plays and those RPOs, you can open things up for Chris Carson, even with a subpar offensive line. And he's been running like a man possessed. So, I mean, there's something to be said for that.
And Doug Baldwin coming back opens things up as well for the whole offense. So, yeah, I do agree with Rocco. I had Johnson, Jones, Carson, but I like all three a lot. I mean, I'm not going to say it was hard to rank for me, but it certainly was not Chris Carson's a forgettable guy for me.
Oh no, I'm not forgetting him at all.
I'm just saying
I'd roster any one of these three. My point is, if we're going on who we trust the most, I mean that involves trusting the offensive line for me, and that's my order of offensive lines in that group.
All right, so we'll go into a little more of a rapid pace here. Do you expect Drew Brees to taper off at all with Mark Ingram coming back? There's some talk that the Saints could kind of roll back to a little bit more of that run first approach. I'm not sure I'm completely buying into it. Are you guys?
If they're smart, they won't. I mean, they're 2-1, and Thomas and Kamara look amazing through 3 weeks. Why are you going to do anything to jeopardize that?
Yeah, I agree. What's great? This is nuts. I did the math here. #math. 63% of the Saints' touches have gone to Kamara or Thomas. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's completed passes and carries. So I do think Ingram changes things a little bit. Mike Gillislee right now is getting about 5 touches a game. I kind of think Ingram comes in and takes about 9. But you can't justify to me taking Alvin Kamara off the field right now. Now, if you figure out a way to play them both, awesome. Terrifying. Good for you. But I think it only helps Brees, and that's what the question is about.
Yeah, it's weird because I read somewhere, late last week that the Saints were starting to adjust some of their blocking schemes to prepare to become a little more run heavy. I don't know. I just can't see it. Like, you've been so productive with what you're doing right now. Why not use Ingram as more of a complement to what you're doing and just keep up the pace that you have right now? It just doesn't make sense to me.
The only thing I'll say, and I just thought about this now, and I didn't think about it before I was writing stuff down, but if you're the Saints and you're a little nervous that you lost week 1, and then you kind of had a really close game with the Browns and then a really close overtime game with the Falcons, you might be thinking, well, we need to do something to make sure that we're not these close games anymore, and running the ball is definitely one way to do that, especially if you're effective with the two-headed monster like you were last year. That would be my only concern, but I don't think it's the right concern because I think Thomas and Kamara are fantastic right now.
I think it scales back a little bit. I mean, he's throwing 10 more passes per game right now than he was last season when they were all so successful. So I think that it lands somewhere closer to where he was game number 2 with 35 passes versus the other 2 games with 45 and 49. I like him to have around that 35 number going forward the rest of the season.
All right, Tom Brady and Andrew Luck are both concerning their fantasy owners right now with some of the lack of downfield passing that we're seeing in those offenses. There's some conversation with Luck that maybe he's still not have full arm strength, and maybe Brady not trusting some of the players that he has. Do you expect up and down performances from these guys over the season, or do you expect that they're going to kind of get back more toward what we normally expect from them?
I like them both to iron it out. It's pretty simple for me. Brady, he's going to be better once Josh Gordon gets fully acclimated and Sony Michel gets fully acclimated. And most importantly, he gets Julian Edelman back from injury. So he's going to be better. And then Luck, he's still shaking some rust off. You can tell when you watch him play. But he's still, there's a play last week where he steps up in the pocket, starts to sort of scramble to the right, and then turns and chucks it on a corner route to T.Y. Hilton, like 25 yards downfield to the left. I mean, guys don't make that throw. You can't make that throw unless you're an elite player. So that's still what he is. He looks a little stunted on his numbers right now. Ultimately, he beat up a really tough Bengals defense, 319 and 2 touchdowns week 1. Probably, I would bet good money on 3 touchdowns and winning that game if Jack Doyle Rules doesn't fumble the football on the last drive.
Gosh.
But then weeks 2 and 3, he's on the road in tough weather against strong NFC East defenses in the Redskins and the Eagles. So, both of those teams play great defense at home. So I'm not concerned with Luck right now. I'm hoping he breaks out of his funk pretty soon as an owner of his in quite a few leagues. But I do think it'll happen.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not questioning Andrew Luck's arm at all. Like, if I'm a head coach and I know I have a guy like Jacoby Brissett on the bench who's like got a cannon strong arm and I need a 65+ yard throw, yes, that's the guy I'm putting in for that throw. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, that's the smart.
It's not an accuracy decision when you're throwing it.
Exactly. That is strictly I need the guy who can throw it the furthest.
And Jacoby did his job.
Yeah, I didn't mind that decision.
Jacoby almost threw it out of the end zone. So, let's go with that. So that doesn't scare me at all. I'm not worried about Luck going forward. Like Miles said, it's 2 tough matchups 2 weeks in a row after a great performance from Luck in week 1. Brady doesn't scare me at all. He's still Tom Brady. He's there. As scary as this might sound, like I know they're 1-2. But they're about to get a whole lot better in 2 weeks. Because in 2 weeks, you're going to have Sony Michel, like a couple of weeks into his rookie year, finally getting steady. And then you're going to have Gronk, Edelman, Gordon, all on the field, all healthy. Like that it's going to be a nightmare for teams to defend.
All right. The Chiefs, the Dolphins, and the Rams are all 3-0. Hashtag math tells us that there's a 79% chance of making the playoffs when you are 3-0. So we're going to play a fun game and say, which of these teams do you still expect to miss the playoffs?
This isn't fun.
Yeah. I'm not buying the Dolphins, like, at all. Like I said earlier, you beat Tennessee because of 2 really lengthy delays with the weather at home. And not because, don't let me say because, but that played a huge role. You're already on the road, And then you beat the Jets and the Raiders, who are combined 1-5. I don't think those teams are 2 of the bottom 5 teams in the league, but they are a combined 1-5. They've got to get things going the right direction. I'll talk about this on the next question. We're about to see something special on Sunday. And it's not by Miami.
I'm out on the Dolphins too. Listen, they beat up 3 bad teams. Well, they beat up 2 bad teams. And the Titans, and honestly, they haven't played anybody really, really tough yet. And the worst part is they're not beating up tough teams. Every single one of the games so far has been a 1-score game.
Right.
So the Raiders game was 8 points. So it's just still a one-score game. So I'm not looking too favorably upon the Dolphins once they get to the meat of their schedule.
I mean, if you got to pick one of these teams, I don't know how it's not the Dolphins, right?
They could very well still make the playoffs, but which one do you think will miss? Not the Chiefs or the Rams.
Not the Chiefs or the Rams.
I don't think any of them miss.
You could be right. But your question said which of the teams do you expect to miss? So you worded it to make us look foolish.
Yeah, no, I mean,
and then you answered last on purpose.
That's rude.
No, I guess I didn't look at it how I worded it until right now. If I had to pick one, obviously I'm going Dolphins.
Yeah.
But I just think like you beat Tennessee, ugly or not, like that's a team that you're going to be fighting for a wild card at this point. Big. If you can steal one from New England at some point this season, I mean, that's going to go a long way.
You can't.
It's going to go a long way. I just feel like that's the key. If you could steal a game from New England, out of the two, I still think that you're probably still better than the Jets right now. You're definitely still better than the Bills. So those are some games that you should be able to win as well. I just feel like their schedule is really favorable. As long as they can steal one from the Pats. Speaking
of that deal, here's a write it down for you. They're about to go 0-4 in the next 4 weeks. At New England, at Cincinnati, home for the Bears, and home for the Lions. I say 0-4, and the Dolphins go into Week 7 3-4.
I don't think that's anywhere near as much of a lock as you do.
Write it down. Write it down.
What are you guys going to bet?
It doesn't matter. It's not getting followed through on. So
yeah, because I'm the only one that follows through with lost bets.
I tried to.
I don't lose bets. So.
Yeah, well, you only make ones that are super safe for you. So,
all right, that's the kind of gambler I am.
It's time for. That's not any fun. It's time for our survivor picks. 50% of the group is still alive. That would be Miles and myself. Through 3 weeks.
Do this every week? Are we going to do this every week?
Yeah, I mean, this is a segment.
One game right.
Yeah. Don't get bounced week 1, and then we won't have to worry about it. All right, so Miles, you have used the Rams, the Ravens, and the Chiefs. I have used the Jags, the Rams, and the Bears. I've won a couple close games.
Yes.
At this point. So who are you going with week 4?
Yeah, I'm actually rolling here. I've not won close games. The Rams and Ravens both were the biggest wins of their week. And then the Chiefs, the Niners kind of came back, but I was not sweating that one out either. So I feel pretty good. I'm just going to keep with my theme of the night. I kind of opened with this. I'm going to close with it. I'm picking against the Dolphins. Patriots have lost 3 games in a row, exactly 0 times in the last 15 years. 15 years. I was 20 the last time. I'm sorry, I was 19 the last time the Dolphins. All right, last time the Patriots. Yeah,
hashtag math.
Yeah, it's late. I need to go to bed. I was 19 the last time the Patriots lost 3 games in a row. They get to host Miami this week. I don't see that as the team to break that streak. I'm taking New England here. I think we're about to see that 2007 big giant middle finger to the rest of the league kind of game. Tom is absolutely my FanDuel quarterback this week. I think he's going to shred. This is not going to be a close game by any means. In the words of the immortal Bill Belichick, we're on to week 5.
All right, so you got Pats this week.
I'm going Pats.
I'm going to go with the Packers this week. And this
you're out. Dude, come on. I don't want to do this segment by myself the rest of the season.
I'm not going to be out.
All right.
Listen, I feel like this is less about the fact that they're playing the Bills or whatever, because I think the Bills are somewhere between what we saw last week and obviously what we saw early on.
For sure. Closer to early on.
Yeah, but I mean, this to me is a safe time to pick a team who has looked really inconsistent to this point in the Packers. So, the Packers basically, they need a win here. They're at home. The Bills are coming off the emotional high of what they were able to accomplish against the Vikings last week. I don't think they sustain that. I think the Packers kind of get themselves back on track here a little bit after a pretty rough start for them. So I'm going with the Packers this week against the Bills. All right, and that's going to do it for this week's edition of the show. We obviously wish everybody good luck here in week 4. Be sure to keep up with us, facebook.com/footballgoons, @footballgoons on the Twitter, and right here on our YouTube channel live every Tuesday night and interactive during the show. You can subscribe, you can comment, to all of our videos, and we'll get back to you. We always try and holler back at you guys on social media, so let's keep it engaging. Your lineup questions, all that stuff. Also, check out footballgoons.com. We've got stuff coming at you all week long. This podcast will drop tomorrow. We'll have our updated week 4 rankings out for you as well. And then on Thursday, our Goons, Ghosts, and daily fantasy football value picks for you. Until next time, we'll catch you next week.